Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm discussing Clerks, written and directed by Kevin Smith. And this is considered to be one of the best independent films of all time. And what's cool is that it was actually filmed where Kevin Smith worked at the time, at a convenience store in Leonardo, New Jersey. And it was shot on a budget of only $27,575. So that's really, really cool. And he just went with a stylistic choice to film it in black and white. And what's funny is that I first actually watched Clerks 2 before watching Clerks. And I think we watched them back to back. I watched them in my friend's dorm. I want to say I was a junior, so around 20 years old, 2021. And I feel that is the perfect setting to watch these movies, in particular Clerks, since with the main characters, Dante Hicks and Randall Graves, they're both 22, and like what Dante says, that with his girlfriend graduating at a point where you're going to be entering into the real world, and that's scary for anyone. So, I don't know, it's just funny, but to watching it the first time, to me, I felt Clerks 2 was funnier, but Clerks is the better written and more interesting story. And apparently there is a Clerks 3 in the works. It was on and off for years and years, but apparently it is in the works again. And this movie also introduces us to Jay and Silent Bob, that iconic duo, and they had so many other movies and spin-offs with just those characters in particular. The latest one was Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. I really haven't seen many of those. Another one was Mallrat, Dogma. There's so many, and they show up in each of these Clerks films. And Clerks itself, there was an animated show, there was a live-action show, I believe, so it has all these other things surrounding it. It's a great movie. It's just 90-minute movie, but it's very slow paced. And I mean that in a good way. That it's just very, very slice of life. Just this is the day in the life of these two clerks, with Dante working the convenience store, the Quick Stop, and Randall at the video store, which are, of course, now are just long gone. Goodness. But then it was released in 1994. So this movie in particular, it's just one of those movies that's just great to revisit every once in a while. Last time I watched it was maybe a couple years ago or so, and then I don't remember every little thing, all the story beats, so then some things sort of surprise me even when rewatching it. But it's just a really, really interesting movie because, it's just a lot of talking, though, so it's just that's what adds to the slow pace of it. But, the conversations are all really engaging and really interesting. And you have that odd couple dynamic with Dante and Randall. Dante just basically being the pessimistic one, Randall being the optimistic one. It could just be as simplified as that. And Dante, with his catchphrase really throughout the movie, how he says it multiple times throughout the movie that he's not even supposed to be here today. And it's just, it's get over it, dude. You're as Randall finally, when he's just kind of telling him to own up to everything, take control of your own life, that no one twisted your arm to be here, when they get into a fight with each other toward the end of the movie. But I don't know, what I really like about this movie is that you learn so much about the characters from very simple interactions. For instance, with Dante and his current girlfriend, Veronica, when they are just behind the register. And that's that great thing with the honor system, with the change sitting there, and Dante saying, well, people, if they feel they're being watched, they're going to actually just, not steal or anything. It's really interesting. But when he's painting Veronica's nails, that just, tells you so much about the relationship without having to, overtly explain things. As they say, show, don't tell in movies and TV too. So I just like details like that. And Veronica is just a great girlfriend to him, which makes me wonder, because what's so great about Dante? He really does bitch a lot throughout the movie, that Randall points out to him, that he's always just I'm not even supposed to be here today. We get it, Dante, but you're there, so make the most of it. That's the whole point really of this movie, that you can take control of your own life. It's never too late. like what he says, no one twisted your arm to be there, and that you say like you can't get out of this because you're comfortable. So he's just comfortable working there, and like even with Veronica saying why don't you go back to school, Dante? Because he just works at this convenience store and that's it. He hates it. He hates the customers. He just makes really low salary, whatever. So he wants, they're like, why doesn't he do more with his life? And it's just the simple fact that this is what people do, that this, as people get older, because in general, we are creatures of habit. So when we have that routine, it's hard to break out of it. It really is. But it's like if you really want something, you have to go after it. So what's his drive and his purpose? We don't really hear him ever talk. We don't in this movie. We don't hear him talking about what else does he want to do with his life. It's not like he has any other passion that he talks about. He has the hockey game. So like when he closes down the store to do that. Then he closes the store later on to go to that girl's wake, and then it's one of those things too where Randall's saying no one told you to do that, you did that on your own. So again, like, own up to what you're doing, take responsibility for yourself, for your life. And Randall too, he's arguably worse of a clerk than Dante, because he comes in late. And that's just like funny too, though, his introduction when he's standing out there, he's like, oh, I hate when I can't rent movies. And then he just goes, picks up the keys, and then like when he's talking to that woman, it's like, I'll bet you $20 you don't get that movie. And then when he opens the door, it's just great. And he's just not there half the time. And then when he's with Dante at the convenience store, when he's just doing all that stuff, like he unknowingly sells that little girl cigarettes, then Dante gets fined. So I mean, he is a troublemaker too, but he's just very opposite, very much the opposite of Dante, very lackadaisical, easygoing. He's not complaining about his place in life right now. He's fine. He's like, as he says, I'm fine with this for now. I know it's not forever. But he just puts in the most minimal amount of effort for that kind of job where he, like what he says too, like, oh, we're monkeys. Like monkeys could do our job, or we're just pressing buttons, giving people change. And we don't really learn about Randall, though. Like, did he go to college? We don't really learn about that either. But I like their dynamic because it's just very polar opposite with Dante and Randall. And Randall's one of those people where he tells it like it is. Not necessarily what you want to hear, but what you have to hear. That at the climax of the movie, after they fight, and they get into that whole fight because Dante wanted to go back. Well, first he wanted to be with that girl, Caitlin, who was his on-again, off-again girlfriend for years since high school. Or 5 years they had dated, but then he's still dating Veronica, but then he thinks he wants to be with Caitlin. And then when Randall just says, like, oh, he doesn't love you, at first he realizes, it's like, oh, I love her, and then just cuts to, oh, yeah, that's right, he doesn't love you. Goodness. And that's funny, too, that with, also, to mention Jay and Silent Bob being introduced in this movie, when they're just standing there the whole day, just drug dealing, they gotta make a living. And Jason Mewes, who plays Jay, and Kevin Smith, who plays Silent Bob, and Dante Hicks, played by Brian O'Halloran, and Randall Graves, played by Jeff Anderson. But, I mean, they're just so, ridiculous. They just trash talk and everything, and particularly Jay. I mean, because Silent Bob just doesn't say anything until his one, word of wisdom line, when he says that, most women, whatever he says, that beautiful women, they don't bring you lasagna. All they do is cheat on you. And then he's realizing, then it's like, yo, he's right. There's one thing he says, Silent Bob, that's this great profound thing for him to realize, yeah, why am I throwing away this great thing with Veronica just to be with Caitlin, where he knows it's not going to work out. So it makes you wonder, why are these women so in love with Dante when he's just coasting through life, not knowing what he wants to do, and unhappy with his life, obviously, but then he doesn't make any effort to change it. So with Veronica then getting angry at him, and then when she's yelling at him saying, well, then I'm going to want you to follow through with this. You go back to her and then she'll dump you. Trust me, she will. And when she yells at him and then she just storms out. So really he loses both of them then. And the whole thing too with Caitlin, which is so wild, I forgot about that whole insane thing too, where she has sex with a dead guy. That's so wild. It's oh my lord. Can you imagine? What the fuck? That's insane. How did he come up with that, Kevin Smith? Can you imagine? That's absolutely life scarring. Jesus, poor Caitlin. Oh my god. By the way, also, the whole thing with Veronica and Dante's big fight in this movie. He gets mad at her when he finds out that she's sucked 36 dicks, 37 including him. Like, he's yelling at her about that, and he's saying, well, you didn't have to go down on these guys, why don't you just have sex with that? Like, what the fuck? I mean, he's really overreacting, first and foremost. But also, it's one of those things where it's a double standard. Like, what, she's a slut because she sucked 37 dicks? Like, who gives a shit? And because then she's like, I didn't give you shit for sleeping with 12 women, and she's only slept with 3 guys. So it's also one of those things where it doesn't necessarily matter the number. Like, if she had said 10 dicks, he probably would have flipped out too. He's like, oh, what, 10 different dicks? You know, so it's one of those things where it's like, what's the cutoff that he would have lost it? Like, oh, 12 dicks? Like, 7 dicks is okay, but then 8, you know what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is that if she had said 50, it doesn't matter the number. It's more so that he's just feeling intimidated, like, oh my god, all these other guys, him thinking that she, like, why would you suck all those dicks? So really, like, fuck off, Dante. It's my point with all that. Like, really, like, piss off, and who gives a shit? And it's not like, that's what's funny too with that, is then, like, when he says, my girlfriend sucked 36 dicks to one of the customers, and the customer just says, in a row? It's like, no, not in a row, so get over it, Dante. Jesus. So that's my 2 cents on that whole thing. And it's just funny. Also, another interesting, all interesting interactions and conversations. Another interesting, because what's cool too about this movie is that it's kind of it's all just in one day. And it's basically just vignettes, with each title card being a new thing, like a new aspect of the job, whether it's the customers, like the thing with the customer looking through all the eggs, and similarly with what Dante calls the milkmaids looking through each of the gallons of milk for that perfect gallon of milk with the later expiration date. But also the conversation with Randall and Dante, when Randall's talking about, when he says, oh, so by your logic, title dictates behavior, then he makes the point, then when he spits in the guy's face, he's saying, well, so that proves my point that it doesn't, because if that were the case, I would have been fired, and yet I did that anyway, because I don't, like, he's proving a point that it doesn't matter just because they're clerks, like, treating the customers with decency. Randall just really is, like, a shit stirrer. But, like, he always proves a point, though. He really does. Because Dante's just kind of, like, he's just, again, doing the very bare minimum of the job. Just, here's your change, and that's it. And also, at the beginning of the movie, too, the whole thing with the guy talking to the customers about, like, oh, if you smoke cigarettes, it causes cancer and all this stuff. And they're saying, well, it doesn't, you gotta die sometime. He's saying, yeah, but you want to pay for it? He rallies them all up. And then when Veronica steps in saying, let me see your credentials, and she sees his card, it's like, oh, you're just doing this just to sell more gum? So it's like, just like he's a sellout. Like, he makes a good point. Like, yeah, you shouldn't smoke cigarettes, it's bad for your health. But then he's just like another just pushover, like, bullshit salesman. That's what's just hilarious too about that. So just all these crazy clients and customers that you encounter at a convenience store. And also this just brings me back, because my very first job actually was as a grocery store cashier. So not as crazy as all these characters, but I've had my fair share of interesting people who have come in, like occasionally, like people that, like, I would see more than once, specific customers actually, which is funny. But yeah, it's a wild thing, any type of retail job. But with Dante, like, at least then at the very end, like, that, like, so throughout the whole movie, him saying, I'm not even supposed to be here today. But again, like, that's not the point. The point is that you're here. So again, make the most of it. Like, don't worry about the fact that you weren't supposed to be there. Like, it's your day off, but you went in. So that's the whole point that Randall is trying to make to him, and I think it does get through to him, because then it's great at the very end, your clothes, and he just throws the sign at him. That's what's so funny too. He does the whole thing with the sign with the shoe polish, so the whole, like, throughout points of the movie too, it's like, what smells like shoe polish? And it says the huge ass sign, I assure you we're open. And more than once, someone popping their head in, you open? Like, yeah, like, no shit. That's what's, it's just one of those things where it's like, their average customer isn't exactly the brightest bulb, but then also it's one of those things where what Randall says that, well, we're not any smarter than our customers. We're not any smarter than someone who just wants cigarette, like God forbid cigarettes or to read the paper or whatever. So it's like everyone, the whole point, like whether you're a clerk or whether you are working a dead-end job, the whole point is that you can still control your own destiny. And yes, it's hard, but that's the whole point of it, that if you really truly want to be happier in your life, that's what you have to do. You have to make the right choices for yourself and figure that out for yourself. So that's what's funny in the sequel too. And then at the whole, I mean, I maybe have to talk about the sequel in a different episode, but by the very ending, then when he realizes he just wants to own a convenience store again, that's just so funny too, but that'll be for another episode to talk about Clerks 2, because that movie's great too. But then like he gets pissy about the hockey games, like, oh, just one ball, like, oh, 12 minutes and that's it. And the one guy, like the one customer, when he's saying, come on, I need cigarettes, and he's like, oh, come on, you can't even pass, and like the guy like just joins them in the game. That's what's so funny to another like interesting thing, that men get so easily competitive. Any slight things, like, oh yeah, you couldn't do that, it's like, oh yeah, really, like, like any slight thing, that's it. With men, like, it's so easy to just like spark men's like really their insecurity. It's like, oh yeah, bullshit, but it's like, oh yeah, I like to see you try, and like and then they lose the ball after all that, and Dante's like, oh, just one ball, that's it, like that, I closed the store, then that's it. Good God. And then also later on when that guy comes in who's the trainer, he's saying, oh, like, let me see your muscles, and he's saying, oh, like, you're scared, you're not in shape, and all that bullshit. That's just so funny too. And again, then like poor Kate, then like he ends up with neither of them really, like as it ends in the movie. Like he says like he's gonna go talk to Veronica, try to get her back and go see Caitlin again. But I mean, I think they're both better off without Dante. Like in their case, in Veronica's case too, and she had been saying that she's trying to push him to go back to school and everything, that she can only try to help him so much. Someone has to be able to want to help themselves, like without asking for help. But you can only try to help so much. That's the thing too. So even with Randall screaming at him too, that for now they're still going to be working at this job, so that's all it is for them. That for now they're just still clerks. But it's up to Dante in particular if that's what he wants to do for the rest of his life. Also, another thing there's the thing, like the cat is so cute throughout the movie too, when one customer asks, oh, what's his name? Annoying customer. Like, oh, that little cat, like, which is a thing, like bodega cats, that they're there to like get rid of mice or whatever, that kind of stuff. So, the cute little cat, so cute. And what's funny too, actually, that a few years ago I read the script for this movie, and in that one, it has the original ending for this movie, which I didn't know about until reading the script. And actually, you can look it up, the original ending for this movie. It's available online. It's on like YouTube and stuff. So if you're interested, I recommend checking that out if you haven't. So after the stores close, this is the original ending, and but if you're unfamiliar with it. So a robber comes in. Dante's just like reading a magazine saying, I'm sorry, we're closed. Saying, did you forget something? I think it's Randall. And he's saying, oh, I'm sorry, we're closed. And then the person just shoots him point blank and kills him and then just robs him and leaves. That's the original ending of Clerks. First off, that's so fucking depressing. When I read that, I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. Thank God he chose not to go with this ending, Kevin Smith. Also, I read about it, and Kevin Smith said that he originally ended it that way because he didn't know how to end the movie. That in itself, thank goodness he realized that this is a bad way to end it. If you don't know how to end a movie, you just kill off a character just for the fucking sake of it. That's not good. So good thing he realized that. And I've read people saying, oh, I prefer this ending because it connects with the whole conversation of Randall and Dante talking about the Star Wars movies, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Okay, I had to look it up because I could not remember the title. But anyway, so people saying that it connected with that, the original ending of Clerks connected with that conversation because he talks about the people that were on the ship that then were killed and they were casualties in that. So then saying that Dante was killed on the job. That then when that customer to that contractor talks about, oh, I gave my other friend the job and then he died on the job. So him saying that every contractor, it's up to them to decide, like knowing the risks of the job basically. And then he's saying it's all about like going with what's in your heart, not necessarily what about the money. So they make the case, the people who like the original ending make the case that, well, Dante knew the risk that someone could, like, this could happen. Someone could rob the store and fucking shoot and kill him. To me, that's bullshit. Like, fuck that. And also, it just goes against the, like, lightheartedness of the ending of just, like, you're closed. That's it. You, like, did your due for the day. Like, you came in, you did what you were supposed to do, even though, yes, there were very many mishaps along the way. And that, yes, he was, like, pissy about it the whole day about not wanting to be there. So, and also would have defeated the purpose then of, like, then there would be no Clerks 2 if Dante were dead. Like, what the fuck? Unless you brought him back somehow. But, you know? So, that's my 2 cents. My 2 cents is thank God he didn't go with that original ending. That this ending just, you're closed after all that. The end of the workday. That's far better. So, again, just a really, really interesting, it's like a very simple movie, but there's a lot of philosophical tones to it. A lot of really interesting ideas that they touch on. And again, at the heart of it, that it's never too late to really just take control of your own life and choose what it is you really want to do. And knowing that if you're somewhere that you don't want to be, that you can eventually change it. So that's a great, like, takeaway from this film. And with that, that's going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at Storytelling Saga, as well as on Twitter at Storytell Saga. You can also send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by leaving me a message in the contact section of storytellingsaga.com or by sending me an email at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, I thought I'd talk about favorite books I read in elementary school. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.